Good afternoon, folks. Mel Elliot here, coming live to you from my studio here in the Overberg. It's a cracker of a day in Verliesdorp in the Overberg. I'm sure it's a stunner in Knysna. I hope it is a beautiful day to end off the virtual Knysna Oyster Festival. So welcome to my studio in this session of a step-by-step demonstration in watercolors, and doing a scene of a Knysna themed painting. So we keep within the spirit of the Oyster Festival, and we'll have the iconic heads in the background as well, like we did on Wednesday in the oils and acrylics painting we did with you guys. So the world of watercolors, it's a beautiful medium. We've been doing watercolors for many years, and we just adore this medium. It's actually less of an industrial cabaret than the oils and acrylics. I find it's a beautiful medium where you can float your colors, translucent and soft medium, and hopefully we'll get some of those results in our demonstration. So remember on Wednesday, just to recap, I mentioned that all art is a balance between content and technique. So the idea, you need to find what turns you on as an artist, or what inspires you, and take that idea and that content with its composition and so on, and then execute it in a way so as to try and achieve a pleasing result. So there we can all work and hone our technique that we find or stumble across in whatever medium, and constantly work on technique. And I learn all the time, and even if it's how not to do something, by painting over and over and over, and just practicing in disciplined hours at the easel. So our technique in the world of watercolors is a 5-step approach to painting in this medium, and I'll go through them with you in a sec. It's good to have decent equipment as well, so as to make your job easier for yourself. And in my preparation or post on Instagram this morning, I showed a photograph of my stretching the watercolor paper for today's exercise. And I work, for instance, on Arches Smooth. That is cold pressed paper. When I do, for instance, a conventional wash in the watercolors, I use Arches Rough, a thick 300 mil type of paper. When I work wet in water in the world of watercolors, when you really bleed and float your colors into each other. And then we use a Fabriano smooth paper, 50% cotton, for instance, when I do my airbrushing in watercolors, or our happy accidents that we do. And you can control the result to a certain degree. That's why they're called happy accidents. So that's just with regards to paper, in which the different papers we use with the different techniques within the medium of watercolors. And then I suppose I need to give my brand, or that brand of paint we've been using over the years, a punt. I've got here Winsor Newton, Cotman or artist quality paints. Here's my box of watercolors, cools and warm colors. So I've got a decent brand of paint that we use as well. And then when it comes to the actual tool of applying the paint, the brushes, here's some lovely sable brushes that we've got. You get the synthetic ones as well, and they don't hold as much water. For instance, when you're wanting to do a nice long wash on your Arches Smooth paper in the sky, for instance, you need something that will hold, or has good water content. So these sable brushes are lovely. Those were given to me by our friend Barbara Barrett. She's a beautiful and lovely watercolorist. She lives in Kinsale Island. She's actually a lady from Knysna. So Barb's art is beautiful, and she's a friend of ours. So look her up. So Yeah, folks, that is with regards to some of the equipment that we use in the watercolor world. The types of paper, the types of paints, and then the brushes as well. And there are all sorts of other gimmicky tools and things which we apply and use when we run into trouble. And it's really a medium that is, people think it's often an unforgiving medium. It's quite the opposite, that in that any bomb out watercolors we have, say you have a watermark from your conventional wash when doing watercolors, we would bring in gouache. Gouache is a more opaque watercolor based paint, and I love working in gouache. If you think of some of the great South African gouache artists that this country produced, like Wello Goodman and Sydney Carter, they all use that paint or medium to get very pleasing results in their stunning art. So gouache can be applied, and if that doesn't work, what we often do is we will turn a watercolor into an acrylic in oil. So you need never have a bomb out of a watercolor ever again. Yes, watercolor paper is, as my stretched paper, is a beautiful surface to actually do oils and acrylics on as well. So there we go. What I have here is, as I mentioned, my paper. And I'm going to just introduce you now to the 5 steps in watercolor painting. And you'll see step 1 revolves around a plan. All right, life revolves around a plan. And the great artists in South Africa, the big names, you know who your favorites are and so on. And that when they demonstrate and they look like they get it right and it just happens, it doesn't just happen. They certainly plan, and they go to great lengths to plan their composition, their idea, their content, and even as far as their technique, and making their job easy for themselves. So you know all about a plan in your everyday life and what it can do for you. Number 2, select white areas. So in watercolors, if you want when we need the color white to contrast our darkest darks, for instance, it's the white of the paper most often that a watercolorist will achieve that contrast, where he's using the white of the paper. If you lose the white of your paper, as I said, it doesn't matter. It's not a train smash. You can apply gouache white, and get your white back. But anyway, try and, in your plan, select your white areas. And what would the white areas be in, say, a scene of the iconic Knysna Heads, which we're going to be doing today? Well, the buildings on the eastern head, and boats in the front, in the grasses that are moored there, in the Hobie cats, and reflections on the water. It might be seagulls and the dark reflections of the water overlapping, and houses here on Leisure Isle, and so on. All right, so white areas you certainly can. There might be clouds, although I'd like to do a more moody setting sun scene. I don't know if you saw on the virtual Knysna Oyster Festival a Facebook page, Andrew Finn put that beautiful setting sun of Land's End as he was walking there. Andrew's the organizer of the whole thing, and his team have done a great job, and he was walking at Land's End there the other evening with the beautiful setting sun over the lagoon. So maybe we'll tackle something like that today, or try and encapsulate that mood. Number 3 is light tones. So you put your lights in. Remember, in oils, we said you paint from darks to brights. Brights traditionally. In watercolors, we paint from light tones, and you put the darkest darks in right at the end. Over the light tones, when they dry, whatever tones you want to leave, you then apply fuller tones. That's step 4. Okay, they're not quite your darkest darks. And step 5 is your final darks and highlights. If you want to, often put highlights in there. They can be whatever, things in the bay reflecting light, or the setting sun, whatever reflection. So there we go. There's a quick 5-step approach to painting in watercolors, folks, and it need not be schlep and painstaking process. It's a lot of fun, this medium, and just enjoy it. I will demonstrate now, taking you through those 5 steps. What I've done is I've got a blank canvas here where we will draw our image, and then I've in step 2, well, that would involve step 1 and 2, and all of these involve step 1 and 2 as well, but we take it further. Step 3 and 4, we'll put in the light tones and the full tones. While this is even drying, in the world of watercolors, we paint. When you demo, you've got to let it dry sometimes if you don't want your colors to bleed into each other. So on the third image, I've got that exact scene where I've done an element of the initial light tones, and we'll put the fuller tones in here, and then I will speak to this one here of already the darkest darks being put in. But that's just mainly from a time point of view. I'll chop and change and show you the different processes, given it's a live demo and I don't have you for the whole day. All right, so I'm going to move my camera to over my shoulder. So just excuse the move around just quickly for a couple of seconds as I get that set onto my worktop here. My watercolor unit in my studio here is right next to my oils unit on my left here, where you saw me painting on Wednesday. So folks, I'll just repeat, if you have any questions about whether it's technique or tips you want or so on, as I said, I have an Instagram page called Mel Elliot Art and a Facebook page called Elliot Art Gallery and Studios. We even have an Elliot Art Online website with all our work and so on, called elliotartonline.wordpress.com. And we run our online gallery there, as well as our painting course dates or setup. We don't have any dates set as such. We accommodate clients that want to come on their terms, on their date. So just phone in or email us, and we'll see if we can accommodate you on the calendar. It's better that way. So you could come for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. It doesn't have to be our old format of a 3-day painting course here in Verliesdorp. It's a lovely breakaway. It's a beautiful little town, and peaceful, and it's a painter's paradise. It's Knysna's beautiful itself, but the Overberg as well. There's so much to paint here and visualize and experience and enjoy. All right, but back to Knysna. Let me do this and turn this around. Camera, as I said, over my shoulder. Let's check. Okay. Right, got our blank surface here. Got a photograph of the Knysna head. I'm just testing here if we can see all right. All right, so hopefully that'll stop shaking there. You'll see my hands for the rest of the demonstration, and hopefully you can hear me speaking as to the steps, the different steps. Just want to have a look there. All right, so there's an image of Bollard Bay and the Knysna Heads. As I said, we lived there. I grew up in this bay on Leisure Island. We lived there for 20 years some time ago in Knysna. We miss it terribly, and it is a beautiful place, a very special place in our hearts. And so let's do Bollard Bay in the world of watercolors, and let's draw steel. Someone once said a good artist will steal, a bad artist will copy. So let's steal some ideas there from our Knysna image, and I'll put it up here, and let's try and get the jizz or the shape of the Knysna heads. We're going to have this embankment here of some grass and so on before we get to the beach on Bollard Bay. And then we're going to have a bay there. Where do we want our horizon? Well, there's halfway there. Maybe have it coming at runs. Remember, the horizon must be dead straight. I've drawn it skew, so let's straighten it there. And our heads, they come here and then they go up there and out there, the western one. And the eastern head comes up here. And there we go. There's our heads. And we've got some trees overlapping over here. Bollard Bay. And that bay comes out quite far there, low tide. Or even at high tide, and zigzags. We put a kink into our shoreline. All right, and we're going to have reflections here to suggest. And I want a tree here, overlapping. And bushes and a tree here. It might be silhouetted. The setting sun, there's the branch, comes down to this level here. That's beach there. You could have a boat, side on, there we go. Someone going out fishing, getting their boat ready. So your drawing or your sketch should look like a battleground, folks, and battle board, all your ideas, and yeah, plan it. Plan it. Take that tree over there, overlapping, so it pushes the western head back. This foliage would stop, and that would be my basic drawing, folks, of the Knysna heads. So let's go ahead and color that in. I know, white areas, so we said maybe there'd be some buildings, or it wouldn't be white areas, they would be bits of highlights and so on in the dusk, the evening time. They would read as sort of yellow-orange lights on the heads. They would be lit up and so on. Right, I'm going to take this off the stand quickly, my phone, and I'm going to show you my palette. Here's my palette. In the world of watercolors, there's a bit of structure in the layout of my colors, my primary colors, and in between my primary colors, between yellow and red, which are primaries, orange appears. And between my primaries, red and blue, so your purples or violets appear. And between blue, my primary, and yellow, my primary, green appears. So there's sort of a color wheel in that funny L shape. These are my gouache colors squeezed out over here. All right, the more opaque gouache paints. And if you want to highlight or so on, I love working in gouache. My mixing trays, I've juiced my palette up and so on. I've got a fairly limited palette, but these are the colors I like most: lemon yellow, cadmium yellow, Jean Brilliant, yellow ochre, cad orange, burnt sienna. Raw umber is a nice color for wet sand when you're doing with a touch of cobalt and crimson. Cadmium red, alizarin crimson, Indian red, and Windsor blue. Those two are next. I don't use lamp black. My old guru and my mentor and my hero, my father, who taught me everything about painting and so on in the world of watercolors and so on, he would religiously use Indian red and Windsor blue to give you a black instead of lamp black or ivory black for your darkest dark. And then we're on to ultramarine and cobalt blue and cerulean blue and viridian green. You can add sap green, but I usually just add ochre or orange to my greens. That's not really an African green, the viridian, but I dust it up. Our greens are very dusty in Africa. Indigo and Payne's grey. And then, yeah, I've got a few more: quinacridone gold and raw sienna and and permanent rose as well. So those are sort of the main colors. What have we got? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 colors or so I use. My standard colors in the world of watercolors. All right, so there we go. There are our steps abbreviated, and I've even got a mount here from our framing department. I cut these triple mounts for artists, for watercolorists. I make frames for oil artists and acrylic painters as well, but for the watercolorists too. And one could have an exhibition just with your work mounted up. It doesn't even need the outer and the glass as a watercolor artist. So it's less of an industrial cabaret, less of a financial burden as well. I'm just testing. Don't mind if my head pops around the corner. You can all see there. Right, so you've seen my palette. And how would we go about tackling coloring in our picture? First of all, I start with the sky. The sky area, I'm going to get a bigger sable brush. Bigger brush, sable, but it's bigger. Right, we're going to do the sky, and then we're going to wash it in. I'm going to try and get that cerulean blue colors and a bit of that orange with that setting sun, which Andrew posted on the Facebook page on Tuesday evening. It was a beautiful evening in Knysna, and we're going to start with our wash. Start at the top, washing it in. That cerulean blue. I'm loading my brush each time. After each stroke, I'm going back to my pool of cerulean blue, and I'm loading it again with that paint, just to keep the strength of the tone of cerulean in the color. As we come down, right, as we come down, I'm cleaning my brush. I'm going to go into the cadmium orange now. Cad orange, we're going to wash in some of that. Let's go for it. I'm going over the Knysna heads that I've drawn in there. I'm going over them. Remember, they're going to get a fuller tone. They are going to be darker. So once you've done the washed in the sky, you let it dry. You take it right down, even to the water. What goes in the sky must go in the water. When you're dealing with peace and tranquility, must go in the water. I'm taking it over the Knysna heads, the outline of the Knysna heads, not stopping at the outline of the Knysna heads, so that we don't get a watermark there. To try and marry it up with the darker heads color at that step 4 later on, it's just doesn't work. So we get a watermark. So I'm carefully going around. I'm even going over this dark tree. I don't mind that, because once this is dry, we get that when we put the dark tree in, we won't see any watermark around the edge. Right, folks, so that's what I would do with the initial tone. Even our beach, as I said, raw umber is quite a nice color for wet sand. Darkish wet sand. Let's put this in. I don't want the beach color to bleed into, if it can be helped, the orange watercolor and make it go muddy. I'm going here. But whilst that dries, we can work on that one. You can pull it all the way down as well, because this raw umber color, pull it all the way down. This embankment here is going to be stronger and darker colors, where the grass grows and the boats are moored here. And you can take it right across, right down. All right, so there's a start of the initial light tones and washes, and we would let that dry before we put any fuller tones into that. And what do I mean by that? Well, here in step, my other frame, let's let that dry. I did just that while Knysna was waking up this morning. I took this demo, this exercise, same scene, except the tree here, which I haven't drawn in. All right, I wasn't thinking. This is that washed in sky over the heads, the water. Okay, I didn't do the beach, but we can do that now. It'll just be a repeat of what we did in the other one. And this is dry now, so now I can wash in the Knysna heads in step, well, it's sort of step 3.5 and 3.5 and step 4. All right, still you could put in lighter tones, but we're going to start putting in the fuller tones, and let's see what that gives us. So I find over a cerulean blue and orange washed in sky, a bit of ultramarine, color like French ultramarine blue in the dusk. This hour in Knysna, the heads sort of appear as that color. Watch as we wash over now. We're keeping within our drawing because I can still see the pencil mark. Now I'm also leaving dots, slightly smaller brush. I'm also leaving little dots of that orange which we had in the initial tone. They're acting as the homesteads or lights at the Knysna heads. You leave those light tones which you want from your initial step 3. You leave them showing, and they stick out, and you get contrast between this fuller tone and that light tone which you have. All right, and this side of the heads, not many lights there, and so on, but the lights might be catching the krantz or here and there, krantzes and the foliage. These sable brushes are magic, man. They just hold the formula, the mixture of paint. And maybe we would have some reflections in the water. So let's put that color, Knysna head's color, the western head in there. And that's fine. So those little lights there, the buildings and so on, are starting to show. And we said we would repeat that beach color or the sand color was raw umber. I'll add a touch of, because this is dry now. This is dry, so raw umber. And a touch of cobalt blue and crimson in the raw umber. It's a bigger brush. There we go. Oh, we took it right down over this embankment. We're going to have darker, stronger, fuller tones, foliage colors here. So it doesn't matter what the initial or light tones is. It doesn't matter, for instance, over here, you have trees and in Bollard on the where the Hobie cats are moored in Bollard Bay there, because that's going to be our second full tone, darker foliage there. So it would close up that gap of white there. No problem. And we said you can drop dots of cobalt, maybe along the shoreline where we want it extra darker to shine against our light shimmering water. Try that. Crimson. So you can bleed or float your colors a bit at this stage in the watercolors. So there's our embankment, and then I would let that dry, folks. One lets that, you let that dry, and then you're going to add in a fuller tone and so on. So like I've done here, I let it dry. I'm not saying these are good paintings or anything, but I'm just trying to show you the idea, what we did. There I floated my colors in too late. I got a bit of a watermark in the beach, but it's fine. We can. So this is once the beach was dry and once the heads was dry. With the hair dryer, we'll dry the top one now, the one we've just done with the hair dryer, and then we will go in and we will float these fuller tones over. So I went and put the fuller tones there in Ballard Bay and here in the foreground with a bit of a path even leading us in there. All right, so I've got a bit of a globule there in the sky. I've got a bit of a mark there. I must have brushed the paper and got a silent crease in it or something, which has picked up in my wash. But you saw how we went over our pencil marks, the initial light tones, let that dry, then the fuller tones, painting in the heads, we've just done with you. We just painted in the beach. And because the lighter tones, the water's edge is dry, there was no bleed or no muddiness or murkiness. So we've got at least a bit of a shimmer there. All right, so let's hair dry this, the top one. We'll do that now, and then I'll show you the putting in these step 4.5 sort of and step 5, the final darks. And one can see how quickly you can speed yourself up in the watercolors. I've even, as I said, I've cut these mounts, and once these have dried and so on, you cut it off the board with the Stanley blade and you stick it in the back. I'd cut these triple mounts so you maintain that bit of white or centimeter of white all around your picture. And it can work more in one's favor if you've got that bit of white around your watercolor, and then the color of your choice for the outer mount area. And then this would get an outer frame as well with a piece of glass, and then it's framed off. It blocks off, the nice thing about a frame is it blocks off all the interference around it, so it puts it into the frame. All right, so that is step 5, 4.5, 4 and 5, which I did there. So let's go back to this one we've just demoed. Just want to test on the screen. You can pick it up. Yeah, it's all right. Okay, test on the screen. Let's hair dry it. Stole my wife's Philips. Oh, it's a safe way. All right, let's do that. Great. All right, folks. So my cameraman and the technical guru for the Knysna Oyster Festival, that's Roscoe. He's been helping me out. He said he clipped the audio there, so you don't have. Sorry about the Safeway or the layering hairdryer in your ear, but that's fairly dry now. Thanks, Roscoe, for that. And what have we got? I quite like the effect here, the cold dripping, floating the cobalt colors and crimson into the raw umber. And I like the translucency of the heads we've got there in the distance over that initial sky color we washed in. And now we would take a step 4 sort of to a 4.5 level, fuller tone. So let's do that. And whilst we painted the Knysna heads in ultramarine, one can give a second coat of ultramarine, meaning that in that area for the foliage on Bollard Bay, and that will result then, folks, in just a stronger tone of the trees and foliage and so on. And now we anchor them to Bollard Bay. If that area has got 2 coats of ultramarine, then it's going to be stronger and it's going to stand out. Now this is the third one. I'm dropping bits of whatever, Viridian or Indian red into that. So here are the bushes and trees in on the bay there. And if we lost some of the specks of light and so on, we can go and put them in with gouache. And our tree, what do we want our tree to look like here in the real close bay? So some ultramarine. Let's have it overlap some green. Some green. We want it to be fairly silhouetted, but that's step 5. We'll come and add in those final darks. Step 5. And we anchor that to this land mass here. We've got pick up a bigger brush. I'm now going to wash in a darkish foliage color just in this area, as you can see, leaving bits of our initial light tone as though there are bits of grass growing with the path. As you saw in that previous step, we had the pathway coming in, the eye leading us in. Remember, the 2 main compositional guidelines in a landscape are my guru, my dad, Dale. He used to drill me the 2 main ones, or tips, guidelines, not rules. There are no rules in art, but they are create a passage for the eye and avoid jarring elements. So passage for the eye, you want to take the eye, now we're floating colors, you want to take the eye on a journey. That's what we want to do, if possible, and avoid jarring elements. But again, I give another whole lecture on the jarring elements, those things which can work against you, all right, in painting. But of course, there's no right or wrong in the world of art. That's the beauty of this. These are just guidelines. They're not rules. It's not a rules-based discipline we're involved with here. And they're just there to make your job easier for yourself. You can enjoy your painting. And all right, so these are the fuller tones of the tree. And I washed this tree canopy in. You might be saying, what is this thing I've done here? The spaceship looking thing. Well, it's meant to be the shape of a tree. All right, the canopy of that. I haven't put, let's take a smaller brush, these type of riggers, and put the stem in. It's coming from, we've anchored it here to the ground and put the stem in. over a bit. Leaving a bit of the paper there exposed with that initial light tone on it. So you're looking through the tree. Well, that's the idea anyway. So you can have a lot of fun with this negative painting. So there's an idea of the fuller tones over the lighter tones, and we're not even step 5, darkest darks and brightest bright. So let's go back to the final frame, which I had done. It's dry, you see, so we can go. I would let that one, which I've just done, this one here, upside down now, I would let it dry and work into it. But let's say we really wanted the darkest darks, and then the highlight, step 5. As we wrap it up, my dad used to put this dark color, Indian red and Windsor blue. There's a lovely dark color for you, almost on like a paste. And so let's do that, our final, and you can see how much darker it is than my attempt in the step 4.5 or with the darks or the earlier step. It's much darker. It gives you a lovely dark color, Indian red and Windsor blue. In the world of watercolors, for your BDC, your basic dark color, and there would always be a cast shadow across the very base, and right underneath these tree canopies there would be very little light. So let's see. Tops of some of these. Have a darker bush there. And so you go over these fuller tones, step 4, and where you want to, and leave some of them that you want exposed, like we did over the light tones with the fuller tones. So that's a way of tackling the step 5 with the darks. You certainly can try that and see what it gives you. Maybe some more down here. Remember on Wednesday in the landscape in oils and acrylics, we mentioned the different illusion tools in order to try and achieve a 3D looking image on a 2-dimensional reference, like the surface is. You've got your work cut out for you. So you've got to make some decisions and choices when painting. And there are 5 guidelines or perspective guidelines or illusion tools we talk about when painting. The first one is linear perspective. I spoke to the lines of energy on a shoreline, for instance, or in a path, or in a tree trunk, which can lead one into a picture and take you into it. The second one is overlapping technique. So put something in front of another thing to push it back so it doesn't come racing over like a tsunami. Heads in front of sky, bushes here in Bollard Bay in front of the heads, overlapping the horizon, pushing them back. Branches and sticks and a tree here, pushing the lake back and pushing the beach back. So that's overlapping technique, which it makes sense. It's pretty simple concept, but if you ask a child to paint the apple and the bottle on the table, 9 out of 10 of them will put them next to each other, the apple and the bottle. They won't move in the room till you get that overlapping aspect. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but it works. The third one is size perspective. Big things come forward and little things recede. They get smaller as they go back. The bushes, for instance, have gone back. If I put boats in here, big boats here, smaller ones on the horizon, and so on. All right, that's the third one. Fourth one is tonal perspective or focal perspective. your focus gets dumbed out. You're looking through a wall of air, and there's moisture in the air. Moisture is blue and white, although this is a more translucent medium. You could certainly water down your colors in the world of watercolors to make them softer and more translucent than you would to get that effect in the oils and the acrylics, where, like I mentioned on Wednesday, my grandpa used to say, if you run into trouble, paint white and cobalt into your distance as a great remedy. All right. And then the last one is aerial perspective or color perspective, where warm colors come forward and cool colors recede. So the blue I used in the sky, cerulean blue, it is cooler than French ultramarine blue. And French ultramarine blue is certainly cooler in this aspect to the Windsor blue I've got in my dark blue, in my dark color with the Indian red and some of my greeny blues as well. It's certainly cooler than this. So I'm not saying it's a good painting, but in that respect, in the color perspective, it is receding how I would like it. And it applies to all the other colors and so on. The orange is you think of orange as the color of the sun, yellow and orange, and it's a warm color. It is a warm color in my eyes, but it's more translucent and dumbed down, and a warm color like that is cooler than the raw umber we've used in the middle distance, and certainly the Indian red and the burnt sienna and reds and so on in the foreground. So whatever color you're working with, whether it be a cool or a warm color by nature, it has degrees of coolness and warmth. And one must put that into perspective when painting a landscape. That's aerial or color perspective. So just bear those in mind, because those are ways of making your job easier for yourself and so on. Right, step 5 is final darks and highlights, it says. So just to show you in the world of gouache how one could bring a highlight back into the picture if we've lost any highlights, for instance. So a bit of gouache white and yellow, or gouache white and lumo orange, can be little stones being reflected. The last light in Bollard Bay, as nature often gives us. There are all kinds of highlights in the picture. Right, there's a little white gouache and blue gouache, but you need just to have Chinese white gouache and as the base, and then you could add your Cotman or your artist quality normal watercolor paints into that, so you don't have to go and buy all the gouache colors. We spoke of, we could put sorry, I bumped the camera. Could put a little boat in there. We could darken, for instance, this shoreline. I'm not going to do the whole shoreline, by taking that raw umber again and the cobalt blue and alizarin crimson, and just give our shoreline here another wash. So in theory, we're jumping back to step 4, fuller tones. This isn't the darkest dark or brightest bright. It's just a full tone, and then the base of that boat there is still wet. So we're sort of like accentuating our shoreline, giving it a bit of eyeliner, and hopefully that'll give us contrast against the light tone watercolor, the color of the water. And that's what you want to try and achieve, is that contrast. Remember, warm loves cold, and light loves dark, and then your complementary colors are ways of stimulating the retina. Knysna is such a special place, and when we moved there in 1986, we had my parents who pioneered the painting course concept in many respects in South Africa. They ran over 300 painting courses, 7-day painting courses from this very spot that we're painting, our home in Bollard Bay. And when we came to Knysna today is without a Wiles painter, the Wiles family I'm referring to. W.G. Wiles was a beautiful South African artist, and Knysna had them in their fold, in their stable. W.G. Wiles, and then Auntie Mary Wiles, Lucy Mary Wiles. She married Brian Wiles, and they lived at Land's End down the way on Leisure Island. And they had a gallery on Leisure Island for 100 years, the Wiles family did. It's still there, the building and so on. But how unfortunate that they've all passed on, because they brought so much to the art scene in Knysna. And I mention that because the old man, W.G. Wiles, he used to paint at Tony Glen there at the back of the Eastern Heads. And he was arguably South Africa's most stunning sea scene painter. And we were speaking about complementary colors. In his very blue sea scenes, he'd often put the fisherman on the rocks in an orange jersey with an orange cap on or hat, and just that bit of orange stimulates the retina, played against the blue backdrop. He was ingenious with his compositions, Wiles was. So those are the other ways, the complementary colors, but folks, of stimulating the retina. One can get contrast that way. All right, I'm fiddling there, but there's a little boat, and one could put, you can go back and draw, or you could draw your little image there and then color your figure in sort of biggish torsos, arms, and little heads. Draw your people with little heads. All right, there's a little person getting ready to go and fish and so on. So folks, there is taking that step 5. I've tried to anyway. That was much darker than the previous one. Let me just hold this up. I'll turn it around again. This was step 4, where we put in the heads. And we had put in the heads, step 3. But the foliage there, this bank and the trees, step 4, the fuller tones. And then step 5, the darkest darks. So let's recap. We had stretched paper, white, plan, select white areas, draw your image. That's step 1. Step 2, color in with light tones, and we did that on the beach and the sky we washed in, and so on. All right, that was step 2. Sorry, that was step 3. We covered step 1 and 2 with the plan and white areas in the same frame. That was step 3. Then step 4 was this one, the pulling in the fuller tones. It's still wet there, you see. I need to hair dry, but I don't want to give you the blaring hair dry. And step 5 is final darks and highlights, which you put in. And new things emerged as well. We put in over there. All right, and then it's not a step, but there's the mount. So that would get mounted and then framed fully. And if one draws with a 4B pencil, one can actually rub out, if there are any pencil lines left, I learned that from my father, you can rub out through the watercolor paint. It's wet now, so I won't, but you can rub those lines out actually, so that's pleasing. I've got a bit of an orange globule there, granulated from my wash. As I said, the irritated paper, unbeknownst to me, when I started washing initially with the cerulean blue, is showing, but one can diffuse that with gouache or whatever, cloud or whatever, cold front passing the Knysna heads. Have a look at, I'm just going to take the camera off this easel here in my studio. We've just been speaking of W.G. Wiles, the great Wiles. Have a look at this stunning picture. exactly where we've been standing and trying to encapsulate. But Wiles was a National Gallery artist material. That's from the Knysna Heads looking eastward over the Outeniqua Mountains. How fortunate am I to have that in my private art collection, painting underneath or in the shadow of South African greats, the Wileses and the Fischottis and the Paravanos and so on. All right, folks, so I'm just going to attach this back onto the stand. Our demo, that brings our demo to a wrap. That brings my art involvement with the virtual Knysna Oyster Festival to a close as well. Thank you so much for tuning in whenever you did. And Roscoe and Andrew mentioned that they're probably going to re-screen these, play them over on the Knysna Oyster Festival Facebook page in the weeks to come, or if I get the link, I'll put it on our one. So if you want to recap with anything, any tips you may have received, you can pick those up. Otherwise, email me or contact me on WhatsApp, my mobile number 082 4466 304, or find us on social media on Instagram and Facebook. And we look forward to staying in touch and possibly being involved in the visual art side of things and the fine art side of things with the Knysna Oyster Festival next year and in the months to come, and all the other events that beautiful Knysna, lovely Knysna puts together. So Godspeed, stay safe in the remainder of this lockdown, and cheers for now. Thank you.